My name is Lily Chen, and I am 31 years old. And I want to tell you about the 14 pages my grandmother Rose wrote for me in the last 6 months of her life, and why they are the most valuable thing I have ever been given. More valuable than the dry cleaning businesses and the commercial property and the financial accounts that my sister Angela inherited from the estate in their entirety. I need to start with Rose before I start with any of the rest of it, because Rose is the center of everything, and understanding her is the only way to understand what the letter meant, and why she wrote it the way she wrote it, and why she understood that it was what I needed rather than what Angela had arranged to receive. Rose Chen came to California from Taiwan in 1968. She was 26 years old and she had $40 and a portable sewing machine, and a sister who had come 2 years earlier and who had found her a room in a boarding house in the Sunset District of San Francisco, and a job in a garment factory that paid enough to survive on if you were careful. Rose was careful. She had been careful her entire life in the specific, focused way of someone who had grown up understanding that carelessness was a luxury she had not been allocated. She worked at the factory for 4 years and saved every dollar she did not spend on food and rent. In 1972, she and two colleagues from the factory pooled their savings and opened a dry cleaning business on Irving Street. The three of them ran it together for 6 years. In 1978, Rose bought out her partners with money she had saved from her share of the profits and became the sole owner. In 1984, she opened a second location. In 1991, she bought a small commercial property in the Richmond district that she rented to a restaurant for 22 years before the restaurant moved and she found new tenants. She built all of this alone. Not without help. She had friends and a community and a network of people who supported each other in this specific mutual way of immigrant communities that understand that individual survival and collective support are not in opposition. But she built it through her own decisions and her own work and her own understanding of what needed to happen and how to make it happen. My grandfather had died when my mother was 12. Rose had raised my mother alone. My mother had raised Angela and me in Oakland, a 40-minute BART ride from Rose's house in the Sunset. We had spent every Sunday of our childhoods at Rose's kitchen table, which was the center of our family's universe, in the way that some grandmothers' kitchens become the center of the universe when the grandmother who inhabits them has a specific gravity that draws everyone toward it. Rose had spoken to me differently from the way she spoke to Angela for as long as I could remember, not with more love, with a different kind of attention. She had asked me questions that she did not ask Angela, not because she loved me more, but because she saw something specific in me that required that kind of questioning. She had told me things about her life in Taiwan and about the factory years and about the early business that she had not told Angela because she had understood, with the specific perceptiveness of a woman who had been reading people for 83 years, that I was the one who would understand what those things meant. I did not know until I read the letter how much she had been planning to tell me. Angela is 4 years older than me. She had always been the organized one, the one who made lists and followed through on them, and who expressed love primarily through management. When Rose started declining in her early 80s, it was Angela who stepped in to manage the practical dimensions of that decline. She moved from her house in Palo Alto to an apartment closer to Rose's house in the Sunset. She attended the medical appointments and managed the medications and handled the financial administration and did all of the things that the person who is physically present and organizationally capable does when a parent or grandparent needs that kind of management. I was in Seattle. I had moved there 5 years earlier for a job at an environmental consulting firm, and I had built my life there, and relocating was not something I could do easily or quickly. I visited 8 times in the final 2 years. I called Rose every Sunday. I wrote her letters because she loved letters and always had, and responding to them was one of the pleasures she maintained, even as other capacities diminished. I sent her articles about things she had told me she was interested in, and books I thought she would like, and small gifts with notes explaining why I had chosen them specifically rather than generically. I was present in the ways I could be present from 400 miles away. Angela was present in ways that required her physical presence. Both kinds of presence were real. They were different. What Angela did with her presence, beyond the genuine care she provided, was have conversations with Rose about the estate that I was not party to. I know this because Angela told me after the funeral, in the specific, careful way she has of telling me things that are designed to manage my expectations, that she and Rose had discussed the future of the businesses and the property at length, and that Rose had understood who had been there and who had not, and that the will reflected those conversations. I said, okay. I meant it. I was not surprised. I was not without grief about it, but I was not surprised. The estate reading was 6 weeks after the funeral, in the office of Rose's attorney, a man named David Lim, who had handled her affairs for 15 years, and who had the measured, careful manner of someone who has managed many complicated family situations, and who understands that the most important thing he can do in a will reading is present information clearly and allow the family to have their responses to it. He read the will. The dry cleaning businesses to Angela, the commercial property to Angela, the financial accounts to Angela, the personal property, with the exception of several named items that went to my mother and to me specifically, to Angela. He read it clearly and completely, and Angela sat across from me with the composed expression of a woman who knew what was coming and was managing my response to hearing it. When he finished reading the will, he paused. He said, "There is one more item." He reached into the folder and produced an envelope, letter-sized, sealed, white. My name was written on the front in Rose's handwriting, the specific, careful calligraphy she used when she was writing something she wanted to be legible and permanent. He placed it on the table in front of me. He said, "Your grandmother asked that this be given to you at the reading, in the presence of all parties." He said, "She was specific about that." He said, "Its contents are not part of the estate and are not subject to probate." Angela said, "What is in it?" David said, "I was not told the contents." He said, "I was asked to deliver it at this moment, and I have done so." Angela looked at the envelope. She looked at me. She said, "Are you going to open it?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Now?" I said, "Yes." I opened it carefully. Rose had sealed it with the same care she brought to everything, properly and deliberately, and I opened the flap without tearing it, because tearing it felt wrong. Inside were 14 pages of white paper covered on both sides in Rose's handwriting. The handwriting was smaller than her usual letters to me, and denser, as if she had a great deal to say and had calibrated the size to fit it. The first page began, "My dear Lily, I have been writing this letter for 6 months, and I have not yet found the right beginning, so I'm going to start with the most important thing and arrange everything else around it. The most important thing is that I see you. I have always seen you. This letter is the proof of the seeing." I stopped reading at that sentence, not because I did not want to continue, because the sentence required a moment before I could continue. The most important thing is that I see you. I have always seen you. I have thought about those 2 sentences every day for the months since I read them, and the more I think about them, the more I understand what they cost Rose to write and why she had spent 6 months on the letter rather than saying the things in it while she was alive. Rose was not a woman who expressed emotional truth easily through words. She expressed it through action and through presence, and through the specific attention she brought to people she loved, and through all the other ways people communicate what they cannot quite bring themselves to say directly. Writing it had required her to find a form for something she had never put directly into language, and she had spent 6 months doing it. Angela asked twice while I was reading whether I was going to share what it said. I said, no. She said, Lily. I said, Angela, Grandma addressed it to me. She said, we are a family. I said, she wrote this for me specifically, and she made that clear, and I am not going to share it. Angela was quiet. I read the 14 pages at that table while David attended to some paperwork, and Angela sat across from me in silence. The reading took about 40 minutes. I did not cry while I read. The letter was not the kind of thing that produced tears. It produced something steadier than tears, a quality of feeling that I can only describe as the settling of something that had been unsettled for a long time. I want to tell you what the letter contained, not in full, because it is mine and I am keeping it, but in the specific ways that are relevant to this story, and that I believe Rose would want shared because she wrote with the understanding that I would know what to do with what she gave me. The letter was organized in 3 sections. Rose was organized in everything she did, including her final letter to her granddaughter. The first section was history, things Rose had never told me or anyone else about her life in Taiwan and the years before she came to California. Her own grandmother, who had also been a businesswoman in a time and place where that was considerably harder than it is now. The factory years and what she had felt during them, and what she had learned, and what she had understood about herself during them. The early years of the dry cleaning business, and the specific decisions she had made, and why, and what they had cost, and what they had produced. She wrote about these things not as a record, but as a transmission, as if she were handing me something she had been carrying for 60 years that she wanted me to have because she understood that I was the one who would know what to do with it. The second section was observation, what she had seen in me across 31 years of Sundays at her kitchen table, and letters and visits and phone calls. She wrote about specific moments I had forgotten, conversations we had had when I was 8 and 12 and 19 and 24. Things I had said or done that she had filed away because they told her something about me that she had never told me she understood. She wrote, that afternoon, I understood who you were. The third section was instruction, not in the practical sense, in the philosophical sense. Things Rose had learned in 83 years that she wanted me to have in written form, because written form is permanent in a way that spoken words are not. Her understanding of what it meant to build something, her understanding of what it meant to be a woman who built things in environments that were not built for women who built things, her understanding of love and what it requires and what it costs and why it is worth the cost, her understanding of what she had wanted for me specifically, not in terms of what she wanted me to have, but in terms of what she wanted me to know. The final paragraph said, I am leaving the businesses to Angela because Angela has been here and the businesses require someone here, and I believe Angela will manage them well, and that is what they need. I am leaving you this letter because you are who I am, and I needed you to know that. Everything I built started with what I understood at 26, standing in the Sunset District with $40 and a sewing machine. I am giving you the understanding because you already have the $40 and you already know what to do with a sewing machine. You have always known. I folded the letter. I put it back in the envelope. I put the envelope in my bag. Angela said, Are you all right? I said, Yes. She said, What did it say? I said, It said what I needed to hear. She said, What does that mean? I said, It means Grandma knew what she was doing. Angela and I talked properly for the first time in years at the dinner my mother organized the evening after the reading. Not about the estate exactly, about Rose and about what we each had with her and what we each had lost. Angela said she had not expected to feel what she felt when David produced the envelope. I said, What did you feel? She said, I felt like she had planned something I was not part of. I said, She planned something that was specifically for me. Angela said, I know. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Did she say anything about me? I said, She said she trusted you with the businesses because she knew you would manage them well. Angela said, "That is not the same as what she gave you." I said, "No, it is not the same." I said, "Angela, she gave you what you built with her. She gave me what she built before any of us existed. She gave you the future of what she made. She gave me the story of how she made it. Those are different gifts for different people, and she was specific about which one was which." Angela thought about that for a long time. Then she said, "She always saw us differently." I said, "Yes." She said, "She was right to." I said, "Yes." The letter is in a fireproof box in my apartment in Seattle. I have read it 11 times since the estate reading. Each reading produces something different because the letter is dense enough and the things it contains are specific enough that a single reading does not exhaust it. Rose knew how to write a letter. She had been writing them her entire life. The final one she wrote was the best one. I started a business 6 months after the reading, not because the letter told me to, because the letter gave me access to something I had been approaching from the outside for years, a clear understanding of what I was and what I was built for, and what the building was going to require. Rose had described it from the inside, from her own experience of building something from nothing, and reading her description had produced in me the specific recognition of seeing your own experience reflected clearly for the first time in someone else's words. The business is an environmental consulting practice, a sole proprietorship for now, with 2 contract employees and 3 clients and a 4th in conversation. It is the beginning of something. I know the beginning of something from the letter. Rose described her own beginning in enough detail that I can recognize the shape of mine. I go to San Francisco 4 times a year now. I stay in Rose's house, which Angela has kept as a family property, a decision Angela made without being asked that I thought was right and told her was right. The kitchen table is still there. I sit at it on Sunday mornings when I visit, and I drink tea and I think about what was built in that house and what it means to carry it forward. Rose's photograph is on the mantelpiece. She is in her 40s in it, standing in front of the Irving Street shop in the specific posture of a woman who has built something and knows it. She is not smiling in the way that people smile for photographs. She is looking at the camera with the specific, complete expression of someone who is exactly where she is supposed to be. I look like her. People have always told me I look like her. I understand now that the resemblance goes considerably deeper than what is visible in photographs, and that she understood that all along, and that the letter was how she told me. Some inheritances are in accounts and properties and businesses. Some are in 14 pages of careful handwriting written over 6 months by a woman of 83 who had built everything from $40 and a sewing machine, and who understood that the most valuable thing she had to leave was not any of the things she had built with those $40. It was the understanding that had made the building possible. She left that to me. She addressed it to me by name. She had the attorney deliver it in Angela's presence because she wanted it witnessed that she had been specific and deliberate, and that the letter was exactly what she intended it to be. That is what I got. That is what I carry. That is everything. That is my story. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop your city in the comments. Hit subscribe. I will see you in the next one.